This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1661. Top 5 childhood favorite comics.
You got it on Wednesday, and you was psyched about it going to the volume up. These guys will talk about it, everything that geeks love. From tapes to laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read. And comics, movies, games, toys, artists, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek Speak, Comic Geek. Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is...
I'm Brian Chrisman.
I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo.
And I'm Chris Everly.
Yes, you are Chris Everly.
Comic Geek Speak.
And welcome to the show. It has been a while since we've done the top 5.
And people have been clamoring for them on the forums.
Yes,
too.
and this actually was your idea, Chris.
Honored, my friend.
And I think it was a great idea. But,
Here.
But God damn you for making me go back and read comics and want to read more and more and more and find them and want to...
Pants, there's nothing I like better than creating a situation where we get your legendary undergarments into a bunch. Gesticulating, redhead, love it.
Oh,
Fantastic.
my gosh. But before we get into the fun and frivolity, this episode is Comic Geek Speak. Blah, blah, blah. This episode of Comic Geek Speak is brought to you by SuperheroStuff.com. And go to for all of your superhero stuff.
Oh,
Of course, Adam's off key now. We're not. But he's using it.
Adam, my dear friend, I commiserate.
That's all right.
I get to be the monkey wrench this time.
That's okay. This is a place to go for all your geek needs, whether you're looking for T-shirts, hats, hoodies, PJs and undies, belts, accessories, home office, whatever, they've got it. And right on the heels of Spider-Man Homecoming, they've got a whole shop full of Spider-Man goodness. They have a mystery box. Dun, 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 dun. What could it be? They've got hats. I see there's also all kinds of back-to-school stuff now. There's an Iron Man suit-up arc reactor backpack. There's a Guardians of the Galaxy Groot big face backpack. Oh, God, there's some Deadpool stuff here.
They have some neat backpacks.
Oh, there's new DC stuff. There's the special designs of Gotham City hats, Shazam hats, Harley Quinn envelope wallets. Oh, God, I'm just going on and on with all the stuff for Star Wars stuff. Of course, their sales change constantly, so keep checking on their website. Subscribe to their newsletter. Check them out on the social media. They're always giving out coupons for discounts.
Yep.
So check them out for all your geeky needs. SuperheroStuff.com. All right. So, Chris, this was your idea. How did you come up with the idea?
Thanks, brother. Well, I saw that people were clamoring for top 5, and I think I can speak for also. I really enjoy doing the top 5 episodes. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We just haven't done one in a while, like you said. And I was thinking about Murd's Diefenbach collection and about my own version of that. And in my parents' house, where I live very close to my parents, there's a pile in a drawer of comics collected during my childhood that they would buy at convenience stores or flea markets or at rest stops on a family vacation or what have you. And what I loved about it was, I looked through it occasionally, I looked through it again for this episode, was that because this is late 70s, early 80s, and the three of us at this table all kind of roughly grew up in the same time period, Murd a little bit after us, but I didn't discover a comic store until G.I. Joe in 1982. So for several years, I was getting comics from all these different outlets where you couldn't, as you've mentioned many times, Pants, if you bought an issue, you really loved it, you may not find the next one the following month at that spinner rack. So I was struck again by just sort of the motley assortment from my childhood and how each book conjured up specific memories of certain trips, where I bought the book, what was happening. And I was very much a Marvel kid growing up. There's very little DC. I have one DC book in my alternates, and that's a war book. I didn't really read DC comics till I was a little bit older. But I was struck by the variety of books, although Spider-Man is definitely the strongest presence here.
Presence.
And aren't you just a cutie patootie? And how a lot of these books still hold up for me now as a middle-aged reader. And I was really interested to hear like what all of your experiences were, because a lot of you are probably going to have similar, where you got this book, this random spot, or this trip, or this convenience store. Or if Kevin Moore was here, he'd be talking about Boscov's probably, for example, right? And I was really excited to hear about what you guys were going to bring to your lists. And for me, this episode's all about nostalgia and about going back to a time where going into the nearest convenience store when I was a kid was called the Hubbard Cupboard.
Okay.
My brothers reminded me of that yesterday. Now it's a Krauser's. And they had a spinner rack. And my parents would stop in there routinely. And the thrill of being able to go to that rack and seeing what was there. And they would always buy me a book. And we'd go to various flea markets. In New Jersey in the 80s, there are very few of them left now. There was a lot of massive indoor flea markets. They'd be like old department stores. They'd make them these indoor flea markets. There aren't many left anymore. I buy comics at those, outdoor flea markets. Of course, I've mentioned this many times, my version of the Diefenbach collection, Murd, was when my cousins were a little bit older than me, gave me their pile of comics, many from the earlier Bronze Age. So this episode is especially special for me because it takes me back to my childhood and to what really got me started in my love of comics. And I have on the table here, and I should mention, sort of the rule of this episode, we're talking about single issues.
Yes.
Not arcs or anything like that. Because that's really what was available to us back then. I did bring in my weather-beaten copies of Bring on the Bad Guys and Origins of Marvel Comics. Origins of Marvel Comics is a more recent acquisition. My original one was destroyed in the flood that ruined my first store. This, though, is from my childhood. You can see how torn the cover is when I Bring on the Bad Guys. But there are individual stories in here that had such a massive impact on me as a kid. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you gentlemen are going to bring to the table. And also I'm hoping listeners will post their top 5 childhood favorites on the forums as well. And I have to warn people, this was very difficult for me in a good way to winnow this down to 5. I do have a pile of alternates I'll comment on as well.
Yes.
So
I have a similar background than what you have there. I was born in the late 60s and grew up in the 70s. And from my visually remembering comic covers and doing some research, it looks like most of the comics the first comics that I bought were probably around maybe 75 or 76. But the bulk of the books that I have for this issue were like around 77 to 79. And I had a dresser drawer, just where I put my comics in, and I would find them wherever I got them. I don't know, like drugstores, flea markets, or whatever. And random issues mostly. But around like 1982, I traded all my comics in for store credit at Pagoda Comics. I got $10 in store credit for it, and I used that $10 to buy a 1974 Topps baseball card of Mike Schmidt because I was getting a baseball cards at that time. So got rid of my comics. Of course, since then I've gotten them all back and then some. And
what year was this?
Whether I got rid of them?
You traded them in.
Probably like 1982.
So $10 was a lot more in 1982 than it is today.
Yeah. And I got back into comics like in the late 80s, early 90s when I heard about my brother was getting comics, and I heard about what happened in Barry Allen Crisis. I said, what happened to Barry Allen? So that's what got me back into comics then. But this episode for me hit a lot of nostalgia buttons and just took me back there to just the warm, happy place of being a 7-year-old kid just reading comics. I mean, I got hit with such waves of emotions with this, doing the research for this, and I managed to find these books in my collection because I guess I had them for so long. They were in the box that had them listed in my database, so I knew where to find them, and I had to do some crawling and moving things around in my unair-conditioned room, and I found these books, and I reread them, and this episode I think is going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to this a lot.
Now, most of my experience is a little bit different in that I remember getting a sporadic issue here or there every now and then, but nothing that I would ever have kept or held on to or that I remember with any nostalgia. The things that I remember like that, I was a little bit older after actually getting to a comic book store and getting that first issue of G.I. Joe, which is my first issue of G.I. Joe, not G.I. Joe number 1.
21, right?
21.
Yep.
That's on my list here. but mine is from that time frame and the next couple years because while I was at a comic shop, I didn't get everything there. I was still going to various places to get them at times, depending on where I was. I do remember a sporadic Batman here or a Gold Key Flash Gordon or Star Trek or something, but nothing that I can remember having specifically like I have these 5 issues and a couple alternates.
Mert?
Well, I'd say I have kind of the opposite problem described by some of you gents in that I didn't have to think very hard about what. Well, I didn't need to whittle it down to 5 comics. I needed to come up with 5 comics because, to be honest, up until the year 1992, when I was 13, and when our friend Matt sucked me into the hobby, comic books were really not that important a part of my life. I didn't have very many of them growing up, and I didn't make my first trip to a comic book store until that same year, 1992, 10 years after Chris's first trip. So I was able to scrape a few together, though, that did have a somewhat significant impact on my childhood and my development as a consumer of popular entertainment. And they're going to be a little bit offbeat, I think.
Terrific.
So hopefully it'll... And I do have a couple of alternates to throw in at the end, too. So.
All right. Well, again, there really are no rules for this. This is just basically our favorite books from childhood issues, and... we're going to count down from 5 to 1, and Chris, we're going to start with you with number 5 book. We're going to go around to me, Shane, and then Adam, and then we'll go to the next one.
Okay.
Do you want me to give a little...
Just talk about the issue. We'll give the issue, and then we'll go, and then we'll talk about
You
the
bet.
issue. Okay.
All right. My number 5 is Power Man and Iron Fist, number 75. The most requested story of all, Return to Kunlun.
My number 5 is Detective Comics, number 468. Battle of the Thinking Machines.
My number 5 is Amazing Spider-Man number 300, first appearance of Venom.
Oh.
My number 5 is Random Unidentified Spider-Man Comic number ? I don't remember what the comic was, and I don't have it anymore, so we're going to have to wing it.
All right.
Tremendous word.
Chris, why don't you
All
start
right.
out?
Now, one caveat I should mention is that a lot of the books I'm going to talk about tonight I've mentioned on the air before in other
Same here.
As have I.
other
Now,
episodes.
I also want to, if you can, give the release date.
You bet. I was planning on a pansy.
Super.
So Power Man Iron Fist 75. It came out in 1981. And Mary Jo Duffy, the often very underrated and outstanding writer who did a lot of Star Wars and Power Man Iron Fist work in the 80s, and the wonderful Kerry Gamble penciling, Ricardo Villamonte inking. The title, when you go to the title page, This Insubstantial Pageant Faded. And I'd never heard of Iron Fist before. I knew who Power Man was because I had a comic of him where he fought Senor Muerte Murd from the Bronze Age. But that was my only experience with Luke Cage. And I knew nothing about that Marvel had this great buddy comic out there. And this was classic, going into the convenience store. This cover popped out at me. It's a beautiful cover. Power Man Iron Fist, you see Kunlun in the background with that famous tower, and they're surrounded by the humanoid plant people, the Hill Three, I believe they're called. And I was immediately floored by the story. Kerry Gamble's art is breathtaking. I don't know if he's still working or if he's even still living, forgive me, but magnificent artist. And what's great about this story is it takes you into the world of Kunlun and kind of gives you a whole recap of Iron Fist's origin. So even though I knew nothing about the character, by the end of the story,
By the way, he's still alive.
Oh, wonderful.
He's 63.
I'm glad to hear that. I still had I came out of the story with a basic grasp of the world of Iron Fist and his great dynamic with Luke Cage. You know, they talk about Lee Kong the Thunderer, Shao-Lo the Undying, the whole 9 yards here. Davros, who becomes, of course, the Steel Serpent, and it's a great adventure story. There's great martial arts action. There's the mysticism of Kunlun. There's the contrast of Luke Cage and his persona thrust on this. This mystical, the mystical world of Kunlun. This comic is I treasure it. I don't have the original comic I had as a kid. This is another copy I bought years later just to have one in my library. There's a great scene where Iron Fist battles a mystical ninja who was generated by their nemesis, Master Khan. And as I got older, I really loved that sort of, and this was made in 1981, but sort of that, the 1970s feel that Luke Cage and Iron Fist very much come out of. You know, the kung fu fad and the blaxploitation trend, and how they both crystallize these characters, and how, in the hands of a writer as skilled as Mary Jo Duffy, you really believe their friendship despite how different they are. And she deserves all the credit in the world for building that dynamic. And I want to mention in the, of course, two short recent Power Man Iron Fist series by David Walker and Sanford Green, there is a tribute to her in the first issue within the artwork. And in that,
nice.
Tip of the hat to those credits for acknowledging the history they're building upon. So check it out, Power Man Iron Fist 75. In many ways, it's like the perfect... Again, what I love about these books is it's all serendipity. This is just the book I happened to pick off the spinner rack back in 1981. I was 8 years old, and it was pure serendipity, and I immediately fell in love with these two characters, and I've never fallen out of love since. That's my number 5.
Okay. My number 5 is Detective Comics number 468, featuring an awesome cover by Jim Aparo with the Calculator going after Batman after he's already defeated the rest of the Justice League. This was cover dated March, April of 1977. At this point, it was published bi-monthly, Detective Comics. I wasn't aware of that. Barbara Zaskis wrote it. Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin on artwork. Wow. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't know jack crap about artists.
Jack crap.
Or, well, I could have said jack shit. I didn't know anything about artists or anything. I was just more about the characters. And this cover had like all these characters on it, and it was an awesome cover with the Calculator, the freaking Calculator. And this actually was the end of a story that was building over the last couple months in Detective Comics. He first appeared in a backup in 463, finding the Atom. And then in the backups in the next issues, he fought Green Arrow, Hawkman, Logan Man, and Black Canary, and they all came together in this issue, and it's the final issue of the story arc. And it's just awesome to look at. And again, talking about this house, there's an Aquaman Twinkies ad in the book. Again, like the artwork is amazing. There's an article in here talking about the new publisher, Jeanette Kahn. How about that? You know, she
came out of magazine publishing.
Yes, exactly right. There's the number here to call DC Currents hotline.
Nice.
24 hours a day. Here are writers, artists, and editors with a new report starting every Monday. Wow. I mean, this is 1977. There's a different DC hotline. I don't think I ever called it. It just took me back. The Jim Aparo cover. Jim Aparo was my Batman artist. But the interiors was Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin. Are you kidding me? And it's it's kind of goofy and everything, and a lot of these stories are so wordy and everything. But this just took me back. One of the books I just had as a kid and loved it. Detective Comics 468.
I should mention again. I want to praise. We talked before about the Tomorrow's publication, Comic Book Fever, by George Corey, and there's a whole section on the history of the Hostess ads.
Oh yes,
in comics. Shane?
All right, number 5, Amazing Spider-Man number 300, which was the first full appearance of Venom.
Yep.
It was released in May of 1988. I had been getting some comics for about 4 years at this point. A lot of them through the comic shop that I went to, which was called Turks in Pottstown at that time. However, every now and then in the summertime, my mom would take my sister and I to visit my Aunt Phyllis in Pottstown. She lived on a street. I forget what street. Across the street, catty corner, was a 7-Eleven. And for whatever reason, that is where I would get my Spider-Man comics. I started with number 289 and would sporadically get them here and there. But for whatever reason, I was able to get 298, 99, and 300 off that spinner rack. All month to month. And I would get them. Mom and Aunt Phyllis were talking in the kitchen. My sister's playing, watching TV. I'd walk catty corner across the street, go in, pay $1 or whatever it was, come back and sit down and read my comic book. So that was something that was quite unique for me to do because I was 88. I was 15. Is that right? 1988, 72 to 88. Yeah, 15, 16 time frame. And still didn't drive. Didn't do a whole lot by myself yet, without a driver's license or anything. Couldn't go anywhere. And but my mom would give me a couple bucks, and I'd go across the street to get a comic book and Slurpee and come back and hang out at Aunt Phyllis's house. And that was a lot of fun for me, and that's something I always remembered. My Aunt Phyllis was crazy, wacko, funny, and gosh, she passed away years ago now. But that was a lot of fun, and something I remember doing for quite a few summers, going there and going to the 7-Eleven to pick up comics off the spinner rack. Even though I was going to a comic store, there were just some things I didn't get, I guess. I can't even remember why. Maybe I only got the DC stuff at the comic store. I really don't know why. It was odd that I picked Spider-Man, because it was a good 12 to 20 issues that I got off of the spinner rack. Not always sequential like that, but those 3 I remember getting right off that spinner rack. Because the one month from 298 to 299, I think they were similar covers, and I thought, well, what the heck? It's the same thing, but it says it's another number, so I'll get it. And 2 parts to the story, and then 300 came out or something like that. But yeah, that was a lot of fun for me, and something that my dad was at work, and Mom would take us while we were off in the summertime, and that was my big boy moment sometimes.
Big boy moment.
Yeah.
How long until you sold your issue 300?
Only a couple years ago. I kept it all those years, and finally broke down because prices were really going up.
So you kept it in good shape.
Yeah. Yep. I would reread it, and I do this sometimes today. I would take, and these guys can see it, I would have it in a board, because again, at that time I was going to a comic shop, and I would get some boards and bags.
The wherewithal, yep.
It would sit on the board, and I would flip it on the bed, or I very rarely held it myself because I didn't want to get wet or sweaty because of summertime.
Foresight. Wow.
And that was just my anal retentiveness. There was no foresight.
Did you make good money on it?
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
I sold all 3 of them together and made a pretty good bit of money on it.
Good for you.
And then I sold in another lot, 301 to whatever it was that I had left. But yeah, I had from 289 all the way up till, God, J. Scott Campbell did the covers. I had a complete run of Spider-Man up at that point. So yeah, it was fun to get them off the 7-Eleven spinner rack.
Oh yeah. Murd?
Okay, the mystery Spider-Man story. Okay, now this is one of very few superhero comics that I can remember owning or reading prior to 1992, and it is the only superhero comic, consequently, that's on this top 5 list of mine. But I thought, I got to represent superheroes somehow, so this is one I do remember having. I actually asked my mother to buy it for me off of a supermarket spinner rack. I found it at the Acme supermarket in Cape May Courthouse, New Jersey, which is just a short trip inland from Stone Harbor. And this is a thing I didn't often do. I was not the kind of child who always pestered my parents for things in public places. And so my mother was taken a little bit aback when I, out of the blue sky, asked for a comic book, and she was a little reluctant to buy it for me, but she acquiesced, and I ended up with a Spider-Man comic. As I remember, the cover, the image on the cover depicted Spider-Man in his red and blue suit battling another Spider-Man in his black suit. I think that's probably what drew my eye to it, because this is the first time I had ever seen or heard of Spider-Man having a black costume. So this would place the issue somewhere in the late 80s, 1990 at the latest. The story inside revealed that the Spidey in the red and blue costume was actually a criminal imposter who was using Spider-Man's likeness and a simulation of his powers to perform criminal acts. And the real Spidey, who was also suffering from a bad cold at the time, as I recall, had to dig out the cloth version of the non-symbiotic version of his black costume from mothballs. This is apparently after he had stopped wearing it and had gone back to his red and blue outfit. And he had to put on this black costume and swing out there sneezing and coughing and track down this phony Spider-Man and have it out with him. And the front cover showed the two Spider-Men battling on the roof of a Skytran cable car gondola with the passengers inside staring out in horror, their lives in battle.
I remember that cover well.
Yep.
All right, so I guess I should be offering a no prize or something for the first listener who can pop onto thecomicforums.vanillaforums.com and let me know exactly what title and issue. I couldn't even. I dug out my panelologist's tools and went to comicbookdb.com and tried to figure out what series and issue this was, but I couldn't dig anything up. But yeah, it's the first time I'd ever seen or heard of a black costume, and well, Spider-Man is probably the one superhero that I was most interested in as a youngster, mainly because I remember seeing him on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on TV, of course, and his appearances on the Electra Company. I had a couple of issues of the Electra Company magazine, which contained little 2-page Spider-Man strips. Might even have been drawn by John Romita Sr., I can't be sure. But yeah, so this is an example of a rare superhero comic that was in my possession as a kid before I officially got into comics at the age of 13. Now, in 6th grade, my class had kind of a white elephant Christmas gift exchange where everyone would bring in little things that they had lying around the house they didn't want anymore, and for Christmas just kind of trade them with classmates. And so a classmate of mine named Chris Click, who was a comic book reader and still is. I ran into him a little while ago. He works at an Arby's, the Arby's out in Broadcasting Square. And so he brought in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan magazine, and I traded him this Spider-Man comic for that. And so it is no longer in my possession, and that's why I can't reference it to tell you what exactly what issue this was. But it's it's a superheroic comic presence in my childhood, and so tossed it onto the list.
All right.
All right. Well, I will go next with my 4th favorite childhood comic, and it's Batman number 291. The story is, where were you on the night Batman was killed?
Oh, I'm still trying to hunt down the 4-part story that's a part of.
I'm going to get to that. Hang on a second, Chief.
My number 4 is the Treasury version of Battlestar Galactica from 1979.
Great pick, Shane.
My number 4 is Mickey Mouse and Goofy Explore Energy.
My number 4, and I mentioned this on the air profusely in the past, The Hands of Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, issue 114, A Fantasy of the Autumn Moon.
Murd. The issue of Spider-Man that you're talking about, and then we'll get back to the number 4, is Web of Spider-Man number 21 from 1985.
I thought it might have been Web of Spidey, but I guess 1985,
Yep.
Really?
Well, December of 86 is when it says the cover date is.
You said it was number 21?
Number 21 with black costume Spider-Man and regular costume Spider-Man over a cable car. I think I still have that issue.
All right. Oh, written by Larry Lieber.
You got
it. Stan Lee's brother.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Shane. I guess you get the no prize.
I knew it was early on. I had to find it. I was in Comic Book DB already, so I quick scoured through it.
Wow, so I was 6 years old. That's a lot younger than I thought I was.
All right. So my number 4 is Batman number 291. Again, another Jim Aparo cover. One of the things that drew me to this cover, it's the Riddler, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, Lex Luthor, Catwoman, and Joker standing over Batman's grave, where it says Batman died 1977. May he rest in peace. And rest in peace is crossed out with red paint from Joker, and it says burn in hell. For me, as a 7-year-old kid, to see burn in hell on a comic book cover was like, holy cow, this is freaking awesome.
Wow, can I get away with getting this?
So this is cover dated.
Part.
This is cover dated September of 1977. And this is written by David Reed, who I don't think I ever heard of and hasn't written much comics at all, really. Art by John Callan and Tex Blaisdell. And it's the first part of a 4-part story where Batman is, killed, and the underworld of villains is trying to figure out who killed him. And everybody presents their case. In this issue, it's Catwoman presenting her case about that she killed Batman. And Two-Face is the prosecutor. Ra's al Ghul is the judge.
Huh?
The jury consists of the Mad Hatter, the Spook, Poison Ivy, the Scarecrow, Signal Man, and Mr. Freeze.
Wow. Signal Man.
And it was just so creepy how, Batman was... You see Batman die, And the Catwoman thinks she did it, but of course she didn't do it. And again, this is the first part of a 4-part story. I had issue 292, 294. I never had issue 293 until years later. So I never read the storyline until years later until the whole storyline completed. This actually was reprinted recently. And let's see, the Strange Deaths of Batman trade in 2009.
I have that trade.
But this issue with the Jim Aparo cover really knocked me out. And again, the inside front cover has an ad for Hostess caked with the baseball cards. The back cover has the SeaWorld with superheroes on it. There's a full-page ad for Mr. Miracle in here. There's a full-page ad here for how you can be in the Superman movie. Remember that?
Oh, wow, yes.
I wonder whoever won that, if we could find out whoever won that.
That's a good question.
I mean, I'm looking at some of the ads in this comic. It's just amazing. The shooting a daisy, the
BB gun,
the BB guns. Of course, the Atlas ads. The half page for Star Hunters. But again, it was a creepy story, fantastic cover, and it was part of a storyline which it took me probably 25 years, if not longer, to actually finish reading.
Wow.
This comic just took me right back there. And of course, I since read the issues in the last week to remind myself how the story ended. I won't tell you how he ended, but Batman didn't die, by the way.
All right. My number 4, a Treasury edition of Battlestar Galactica. Now, I see on some things it says 1978, some 1979. It's got to be around then when the TV show came out. Marvel Comics got the rights to do a Battlestar Galactica comic. And all I remember about acquiring this was my parents bought it for me from somewhere. It had to be a Woolworths.
I have that Treasure Edition too.
Or the Freed's local supermarket that was around my parents' house. I loved the TV show when it aired. I know it was in the theater. I did not see it in that first movie.
Buck Rogers in the theater too.
Oh God, I wish I would have known that too. But it was on like an ABC Sunday night movie of the week thing, and it was on till like midnight. I mean, it was long. Yet for whatever reason, I was allowed to stay up and watch that, and I was hooked on Battlestar Galactica.
Right there with you, brother.
And at some point in the near future of that show airing, my parents got me this Treasury Edition, and I pored over that over and over and over again. And of course, at that time, it seemed larger than life because I was, 6.
Is Walt Simonson art?
It says Ernie Colon.
Oh, Ernie Colon.
I think Walt Simonson did some of the actual...
You're right, the monthly book. You're right.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm fairly certain that this Treasury Edition I had is the same as at least the first few issues of the comic book, and then maybe Walt did a lot of the other ones. I know he did them. But I'm not 100% certain of that. I can't find anything other than eBay listings for the Treasury Edition itself. But yeah, I just remember having that and destroying it, reading it over and over again. I can remember taking Silly Putty and transposing pictures off of it.
Silly Putty!
Off of that comic Treasury Edition.
Wow.
I didn't
are just...
I mean, that was...
Take me back to my childhood,
Yeah,
Shane.
that's one of the earliest comic books I remember reading that I actually remember. And I can remember a Colonial Warriors, probably Starbuck or Apollo, in the one bottom corner of the page and taking the Silly Putty over it and, oh man, look at that, now I got it on Silly Putty, and then mashing it up. But yeah, that's one of my earliest recollections of reading a comic of some kind.
And when you think about it, the Battlestar Galactica, the original, call it pilot, I mean, it's television, so they have to sanitize it a bit, but it's a very dark story.
Oh, yeah.
And in the new version, they fully realized, I think, the darkness of that story.
Yes, they did.
Like, even those insectoid creatures, like, using people as food in those catacombs.
Yeah.
And, it's...
Discovering them being plastered away behind the honey or whatever it was. Yeah, that was completely creepy to the nth degree. And crazy, weirdo creatures like the double-faced singers. Yeah. They were also in the comic book, and they were creepy as all get out in there, too.
And every kid thought the Cylons were the coolest thing.
Oh, my God, yeah. Yeah, the Toasters, man. They were great.
By your command.
Yeah. I just absolutely fell in love with that show. And I thought it lasted for years. The reruns that would go on Sunday mornings, man, over and over again, only to find out it was just one long single season. I couldn't believe it.
Plus, Jane Seymour was hot.
Yep. If you ever get the chance, totally off topic from the comic part of it, but if you ever get the chance to watch the original movie in a DVD, I think there's a great comment. Well, I know there's a great commentary. I don't know which version of it is on the DVD, though, of Richard Hatch, Dirk Benedict, and Herbert Jefferson Jr.
Really?
Talking about
that's fun.
Starbuck. Oh, my God. Some of the stories they go through. I think they all kind of had a crush on Athena.
I loved her, too.
There's reasons they discuss why she is and is not on the show at certain points, as Cassiopeia is in it now. It's really interesting commentary. But, yeah, that Treasury Edition, man, that was something special.
Rest in peace, Richard Hatch.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
All right, Murd.
All right. Mickey Mouse and Goofy Explore Energy. Brought to you by the Walt Disney Educational Media Company.
Great.
This might conceivably be something of a collector's item because it was never available in stores. It never found its way to newsstands or magazine racks. It was only available through the Walt Disney Educational Media Company's Wide World of Energy Multimedia Kit.
Wow.
Which was a classroom instructional tool, which included a color and sound film strip, a board game, 13 by 18-inch flashcards, a bunch of other odds and ends, and 30 copies of this stupid comic book I'm about to talk about. Thanks to comicbookdb.com, I was able to find out that the creators of this comic are writer Carl Fahlberg, penciler Tony Strobel, and inker Steve Steer Sr., better yet. Because they're not credited in the comic itself. So the comic it's about Mickey and Goofy setting off on a fishing trip. This is 1976 is when this was published, by the way. The United States was in the grip of an energy crunch. And Mickey and Goofy are heading off on a fishing trip, and they're talking about how concerned they are about non-sustainable, finite energy sources. And then their car runs out of gas. The two of them lie down under a tree and take a nap, and they're visited by Any, the spirit of energy, who is basically just an atom symbol with a smiley face in the middle of it. And I would be willing to place a modest wager that years later, the creators of the first season of The Simpsons based the character Smilin' Joe Fishin on little Any, spirit of energy.
That's a good call.
So Any takes Mickey and Goofy in their dreams on a little historical tour through the history of mankind's unending search for new sources of energy, and also gives them a bit of a glimpse of the future as to what the possibility of discovering new and more sustainable sources of energy might look like, as hinting strongly that solar energy might be the solution. It's mildly propagandistic at points. And it ends with Mickey and Goofy waking up and finding an ecologically responsible way to get themselves to the fishing hole, namely hitching up a mule to the front of their car and dangling carrots in front of its nose to get it to pull the car along. That is actually what's depicted on the front cover of this issue, which is bright yellow cover with Mickey and Minnie riding a mule with the carrots, and Any is there as well. This is something my dad fished out of a yard sale for me, most likely a yard sale held by a former elementary school student who was distributed a copy of this comic in the classroom. And he brought it home and gave it to me, and I can remember keeping it in my father's office on the second floor of the Christmas barn as a kid. And whenever I got really, really, really bored, I would get it out and read it. So it's kind of a rainy day activity comic for me. It's educational, not very much fun, but it's something I read as a kid. So, and it's kind of, unusual. It's got something of an oddity, so I put it on the list.
And according to Overstreet, which actually is not very viable at all, and like in near vacation, it's like $12. But it looks like it was also a giveaway at Exxon.
Oh, that's fitting.
So there you go. But I don't think I've ever heard of that book before.
Neither I. That's fantastic, Bert. All right. I've raved about this book before. Master of Kung Fu, issue 114, A Fantasy of the Autumn Moon. When Murd and I did the triple action Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Shang-Chi spotlight a couple of years ago, I made this issue sort of the centerpiece to some degree of that discussion when we talked about Shang-Chi. Again, so this is 1982. I am 9 years old. And this was purchased off a spinner rack. I don't remember which convenience store at the time. My parents, we were out shopping, and bless my parents, they always encouraged my voracious reading habit. And whenever I'd see comics, they would always usually buy me at least one comic book. There are certain books in my reading life as a comic fan that were transformative. This is one of them. I'd never seen a book like this before. I realized as a 9-year-old, as I was reading it, that this was different than most superhero comics I had read. And as I got older, I realized how sophisticated and mature the premise of the story is. The creative team is Doug Monk. The late, great Gene Day, I'll talk more about in a moment, as the penciler.
Yep.
And inker. Christy Shield does a magnificent coloring job on this, and great lettering by Jim Novak. When I talk about the art of the one-and-done issue, this is the comic I always think about. I revere this issue so much, I have a huge blow-up poster of the cover of this issue in my store, actually. And I remember reading it as a kid, and I couldn't verbalize my appreciation the way I would as an older person, or have the wherewithal to appreciate the complexity. The artwork simply blew me away. I'd never seen art like this in a comic book before. Even as a 9-year-old, I realized this is something special. I read later that Monk based this on a Chinese folklore. And just quickly, Shang-Chi, he's working for Dennis Nayland Smith, is an intelligence operative. Nayland Smith is one of the Sax Rohmer characters that Marvel got a license for at this time. He's sent to China to help a couple who are being hunted by one of, at that point, the late Fu Manchu's mystical assassins who were known as the Sai-Fan. And Monk incorporates this Chinese folk tale into the world of Shang-Chi. And I don't want to spoil the story too much because I think it's just magnificent. But the artwork is so powerful. And this is one of my earliest exposures to a comic book as something that being literary, that it's more than just escapist entertainment. And when you read about Gene Day, who died in his 30s, apparently he was such a workaholic, he rarely left his drawing table. He lived a very sedentary existence, which probably contributed to his early death. But the body of work this man left behind in Shang-Chi, he did a few Star Wars issues, which I talked about when we did our Star Wars Spotlight some years ago, Marvel Star Wars comics, some other covers and fanzines and so forth. To this day, this issue brings out such emotion in me because this is a perfect package where scripting, penciling, inking, coloring, lettering, all are in perfect synergy. And the mastery of Day's ability, like look at that page, of Day's ability to tell a story.
Yes.
And what he incorporates in terms of design, of style, of the elements of the folk tale. I'm looking at I just showed Pants a splash page of a mystical dragon, for example. They don't make them like this anymore, ladies and gentlemen. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is pretty much as good as it gets, especially when it comes to sort of the so-called one-and-done issue. And you realize how the Shang-Chi book, in the hands of Doug Monk, is one of the greatest, as far as I'm concerned, finite Marvel titles of all time. And Marvel had finally got the license back recently to reprint, because you couldn't get these. There was no trades of this book. You had to get the back, so they had lost the Rohmer license, because Fu Manchu and Smith are mentioned in almost all the issues, or they appear in them. And they worked it out that they're releasing now 4 omnibuses. I think they've done 3 of them so far, of the whole series. Don't think? Buy them. This is top flight. This is literary comic book work right here. And Gene Day, I've told Pants, one of my original artwork holy grails is to own a Gene Day original art page from Shang-Chi. I think this.
I sort of steered you in the right direction.
Yeah, but I never had the money for them at that time. But keep doing it, though.
Oh,
keep doing it.
I'm all about enabling when it comes to art. Oh, yeah, buy it.
For me, he had a brief career. He is one of my favorite artists of all time. His artwork is just, it's breathtaking. So that's a transformative book for me in my comic book reading life. That's my number 4.
Very good. All right, Shane, you want to give us your number 3?
My number 3 is Justice League number 4 from 1987.
Okay.
My number 3 is Marvel's adaptation of Return of the Jedi.
I knew that was coming.
Nice.
My number 3, another transformative book for me,
Oh,
Daredevil 181,
nice.
entitled Last Hand.
And my number 3 is Flash number 275, The Last Dance.
Now, everyone here knows my love of Justice League.
Oh, yeah.
The Bwahaha.
The Bwahaha era. I
But
mean, I love
also-
all Justice
well,
League.
sure.
but-
Waiting for my omnibus to arrive, by the way, Shane.
Yeah, I just couldn't afford that one that time. I had to remove it. Anyway, Justice League number 4 is the issue where Booster fully comes into the league, as well as the Royal Flush Gang attacks the headquarters, which I love the Royal Flush Gang. I think they're a fantastically used gang of evildoers that get thwarted by the league over and over again, but I just love the playing card aspect of it.
Love them in that early Batman Beyond episode they were using.
Oh my God, so good in the Batman Beyond. What I remember of getting this issue, and the date it came out is August of '87. Okay, that makes sense. The next issue, well, not the next one, but one in my list later, came out a month later, yet I remember distinctly getting both of these off of a spinner rack in a drugstore or a convenience store in Ocean City, New Jersey on vacation. I can't tell you where, but I remember picking up these two and the Justice League Annual number 1. The problem is that annual was, I think, September of '87. I can't figure out how I got these, yet still started to collect Justice League, unless I'm off by a year and I got these and went back and got everything that I was missing. I just cannot quite remember what year I actually got these in, but I know it was at Ocean City, New Jersey, some convenience store we were at, and I picked up a couple comic books, and it was Justice League because I saw Batman on it somewhere. Okay. Again, loving the Batman doesn't appear on that cover, but the annual something, so I picked up a couple issues around it, whatever they had, and it was 4 or 5 in the annual. From that point forward, absolutely loved Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. That was a gateway into something so splendiferous for me to collect.
That's when the legend started, ladies and
Oh
gentlemen.
my God. But it all started with getting some of these Justice League issues and then finding out that what they also were in and what their other books were and going that way. They were probably, one of the first active back issues I sought out was that first issue of Justice League, and that took me a while to find and buy. I think I paid like $10 for it back in the late 80s, whatever it was, when I was at a convention in Pottstown at what was the Holiday Inn. It was not something easy for me to come by being a kid of 15
Sure.
with no job or anything. But yeah, that issue, I revel in that issue. I was just reading it last night out of one of the multitude of trade paperbacks and hardbacks I have of it. It's just such a fun issue, even though Max Lord is the impetus of all of it, both from Booster Gold side and the Royal Flush Gang side. It's a lot of fun. So that issue has a special place in my heart.
All right. The Star Wars Return of the Jedi adaptation. This is something that I found rolled up and stuck into my Christmas stocking at Christmas time, either 1983 or 84. I'm not sure which. I'm actually kind of leaning towards 84 because I think when I got to see Return of the Jedi, it was when it was re-released to theaters around Christmas time, 84 into New Year's 85. Does that ring true with you guys, your recollection?
Well, I saw when
remember
it came out
being-
originally in '83. I don't know if there was was there a
I
reissue?
don't remember a re-release for that, but you could very well be
Sure,
right.
yeah.
I remember seeing it right away with my one
me too.
neighbor taking me.
Yeah, I can remember being on the van that transported me to kindergarten, which would have been like the fall of 1984, and one of my classmates saying that he'd seen a commercial for that Return of the Jedi was coming back to theaters,
I have
quote,
to interject
just
for a
for the
moment.
fun of it.
Murd, it's remarkable that you have memories of kindergarten, by the way. Incredible. Fantastic.
Oh, they go back earlier than that, Chris.
Oh, jeez.
Believe you me. But yeah, I do remember getting this comic for Christmas and being very excited about it because I was all about Jabba the Hutt in those days. I might even have gotten the Jabba the Hutt action playset at
I know
the same
that was
time.
your favorite playset. Yep.
Oh, yes. Loved that thing to death. And Jabba beat everybody, by the way, when it was Adam's playtime. Every single action figure ended up in that dungeon. I don't care who they were. But yeah, so anyway, I got to read this comics adaptation, which did indeed have Jabba the Hutt in it. And the one image that sticks out most in my mind, and I did definitely read this comic before I ever got to see the movie. The one thing that was somehow or other I caught wind of the fact that Darth Vader was Luke's father. That didn't throw me. But I remember one panel where Luke is examining his cybernetic hand, which had sustained blaster damage in the battle with Jabba's men at the Pit of Carkoon. And I had not realized that Luke had a mechanical hand. So this comic sort of spoiled that for me, you might say. And this was the single-volume version of it. This is not the 4-issue miniseries that was published later. Mm-hmm. This is, I think it came out through Marvel Books. It's like a single 150-page comic, roughly the dimensions of a magazine or a coloring book. And the 4-issue miniseries was later serialized and adapted from that. But I got the thing in just as one package, and it was in my Christmas stocking that morning, and I know I read it many, many times. And my old tattered copy of the same is probably in a dusty old box in my parents' attic to this day. But yeah, it definitely fueled my my Star Wars fandom and my love for that particular chapter of Star Wars lore that involved everyone's favorite slugoid crime lord Jabba the Hutt.
Now Shane, that movie dash was also drawn by Al Williamson, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
Because he did all the Star Wars adaptations. I forgot the inker work was amazing. Forgive me, but I think no one did Star Wars comics better visually than Williamson. Just amazing visuals.
Archie Goodwin was the writer.
Yes, I know he wrote all the adaptations. Or no, Roy Thomas wrote the first one. I think Goodwin did Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So, good pick, Murd.
Archie Goodwin did indeed write Return of the Jedi.
Did they say who the inker is?
Inker is Carlos Garzon.
That's right.
And Al Williamson.
Yep. I always thought Williamson just nailed Darth Vader.
Well, at least that's how it's listed here. Both pencilers and inkers, both of them.
All right, my third. I get chills just looking at this. So this is Daredevil 181, entitled Last Hand. Story and art, Frank Miller.
No,
Finished art and colors, Klaus Janson. Joe Rosen, letterer, Denny O'Neil, editor. Now, so it's 1982. I'm 9. And we'd often go to the Watchung Flea Market. And if you know Central Jersey, you know what I'm talking about. Off Route 22, it was one of these indoor flea markets. It used to be a department store, and then they made it an indoor flea market, all the different stalls. And there was a comic stall in the back corner called the Drawing Board. It was run by a married couple, very nice. They also had, I think, a brick-and-mortar store in another town nearby. And, but we'd go to the flea market often. I love 80s flea markets because there was the ninja craze. Mm-hmm. They're like the stand with the shuriken and the fake katana and the ninja outfits and stores with cassette tapes of I'd buy Cheap Trick there and things like it was it was I love going to these flea markets. Yep. And my parents would always take me to the Drawing Board, and the cover stood out. I knew who Daredevil was. I'd read some of his adventures here and there, but I knew nothing about Frank Miller at this point. I didn't know what was going on in Daredevil. The cover looked cool. I knew who Bullseye was because I'd read some his 70s appearances. I didn't know who Elektra was, but the cover looked great. Bullseye versus Elektra. One wins, one dies. And I've talked about this issue at length when we did our Daredevil in the Copper Age Spotlight a couple of years ago. So all I'll say is I'm a 9-year-old kid. This blew off the top of my head. Because as we all know, Frank Miller was not writing for 9-year-old kids in Daredevil.
No, he wasn't.
In 1982. And again, all credit to my parents who really gave me a lot of room when it came to my entertainment and what I was reading. And I will always appreciate the room they gave me, and they trusted me. And when it was movies, television, comics, books, there really wasn't that much supervision. I don't mean I was watching porn at midnight as a 9-year-old, but, they kind of let me check things out. So I'd never seen violence portrayed in a comic book the way I saw it up to that point as a 9-year-old, as I saw in Daredevil 181. And again, I think this is a masterpiece. I still love reading. I usually read this story at least once a year because it's all from Bullseye's perspective. He's the narrator of the story. And the sequential art of Miller and Jansen, and the way they tell the story. And I always go back to the actual battle between Bullseye and Elektra in a parking garage, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. I mean, it's like this brutal, grisly ballet. And there's not a lot of... Bullseye's doing a little bit of narration, but most of it's just the action with no captions or dialogue. And the way they take you from one moment of the fight to the next, I mean, it's brutal. And when he actually impales her, we all know the famous scene when he runs her through with her own sigh. I remember a 9-year-old just going like, like I'd never seen anything like this in a comic book before. But it's not gratuitous. It serves the story, and you appreciate that more as an older person. You look at the story again, and when she, bleeding to death, she crawls and dies in Matt Murdock's arms on the steps of his brownstone. It's amazing. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how important Miller's early Daredevil work is for comics and for the American comic book in general. And this, again, like the previous book I mentioned, Astro Kung Fu 114, this is a book that had transformative effect. You know, after reading a book like this, a lot of comics just weren't going to cut it for me anymore, even as a kid. So, Daredevil 181, that's my number 3.
And that's your number 3 comic. Wait to see. I can't wait to see number 2 and number 1.
My last 2 are more family nostalgia books.
My number 3 is The Flash 275, The Last Dance, written by Cary Bates, art by Alex Saviuk and Frank Chiaramonte on ink, Todd Klein on the letters. And this is cover dated July of 1979. I think Barry Allen was my favorite character when I was a kid. I know I had several other Flash comics at the time. I know I had some of the 250s and 260s, but this 275, again, this cover, had a lot of characters on it. It's, Barry and Iris. Iris is dressed as Batgirl on the cover.
Huh?
And at her masquerade party. And God damn it, if this cover wasn't just on eBay in the last 2 weeks.
Really? You know what it went for?
No, it was like $12,000 or make your best offer.
You didn't get it?
No, I didn't get it. But it's no longer on eBay. Somebody bought it. But it's like, holy crap, there's the freaking cover to that. Dick Giordano cover. But this is where Iris, spoilers, Iris dies in this issue. And reading it as a kid, actually, there's also a full-page ad in here for this book saying, this is the one. This is the issue where the pieces of the puzzle come together and explode. Don't miss it. And I didn't miss it, but what I did miss is subsequent issues.
The days of the spinner rack.
Yeah, so on this last page where Barry and Iris are on the floor in the bathroom, and this Batman guy dressed says, got to get one of them to a hospital right away, but I'm afraid the other one is dead. I'm like, what? What? And again, it took me years to read the rest of it.
You see little pants like going into a fluster over this? Fantastic.
So this really just really stuck with me, and I did eventually, obviously went back and got all the other issues. But it's been a long time since I've read those. So again, now I want to just go back and reread all these frickin' things. And and also on the back page, a cool Spalding ad with Rick Barry and Dr. J.
I remember that one.
But yeah, Flash 275. What a great cover, great story, and a great cliffhanger. Especially when you don't get the next issue for 25 years.
Don't let it make you bitter pants.
What bugs me is I'm looking through these back issues, and there's ads in there for subscribing to DC Comics. It never occurred to me to subscribe to the damn comics.
I actually did that for a few years.
Okay, I was just going to say, I don't know anybody who actually did that. So you did that through DC Comics?
It was in, 96, after I was married. I was cutting back, thinking I was maybe getting out of comics. And I subscribed to Batman, Detective, and maybe Justice League. And I did that for maybe 2 years until I got back into going to a comic book store full time. But yeah, there was a couple of years.
See, that never occurred to me in the 70s as a kid, because I would miss issues all the time. anniversary issues. Like I never found like issues 300s of these issues. I've never found those because they were just always gone.
Yeah.
And missing issues of storylines. I don't know. I guess I wasn't too concerned as a 7 or 8 year old kid necessarily about that. I just loved seeing all these many. As you can see, it's all mostly DC comics. Actually, it's all DC in my list here right now. I got a few Marvels. But it's mostly DC books because I love the Super Friends and the Challenge Super Friends and what have you. But almost always have like multi-covered characters. They have more than one character on the cover to draw you in. It's like you get your money's worth. I feel
Multi-character covers.
Thank you. And especially those two Jim Aparo Batman covers, which is fantastic.
And I'm sure some issue somewhere along the way I bought it like Walden Books.
Walden
but I don't
Books.
remember specific ones like that.
All right. Adam, you're starting out with your number 2 book.
All right. My number 2 is Alf number 11.
Fantastic. Mine is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 124, The Mark of the Man-Wolf.
Oh, man, that's a great story. I won't say the howl. My number 2 is Action Comics 484, the 40th anniversary issue, Superman Takes a Wife.
Mine is G.I. Joe 21, Silent Interlude.
Oh.
Well, that's your number 2. Wow.
That is my number 2.
Mert?
All right, so this harkens back to my childhood indeed. This issue of Alf was cover dated January of 1989, actually published October of 1988. It's a Halloween special issue. I would have been, I guess, just starting 4th grade at this time, and I was all about Alf. I really enjoyed watching that show every Monday night on NBC. And our favorite wisecracking alien life form is shown on the front cover here, interacting with a large jack-o'-lantern carved in his likeness. There's a big green gourd strapped to the front of it to represent his snout, and he is saying, "Quaint. Yes, very quaint." And the issue and the story inside, as I said, it's a Halloween story. I remember getting this issue on an October weekend outing down to Cape May, New Jersey, at the far southern point of the Great Garden State, with my folks. It was a weekend. We were down there in Stone Harbor for one reason or another, and school had already started. And as a special treat, I was purchased this comic book at a bookstore around Washington Square in Cape May. And Cape May, let me tell you, haunted Victorian Cape May. It's a very old settlement down there. It was founded as a vacation retreat in the 1890s sometime, when much of the rest of this part of the state was nothing but wilderness. But a special railroad line was built down there from Philadelphia. It was advertised as a vacation spot to Philadelphians. And so it's got a long Victorian history. There's lots of neat, creepy old houses down there. And it's just a really neat place to be at Halloween time.
Went there for my honeymoon.
And for your honeymoon, you say?
Yep.
All right, excellent. And I remember there were lots of really neat Halloween store displays at Halloween time 1988 when I picked up this comic. The story involves Alf going out trick-or-treating with young Brian Tanner, the younger son of his host family, and getting picked up by the police, and, wackiness ensues. And then there's a backup story in which Alf gets a pet mynah bird, which accidentally memorizes the secret formula for a Melmacian superweapon.
Melmacian.
Yes, because Alf's home planet is Melmac. Some say Melmatian. I prefer Melmacian.
Melmac. Yeah.
Yes, it's just whichever fictional
I didn't realize there
feminine.
was a controversy over how they pronounced the name. Terrific.
All right, so the bird memorizes the formula for this thing called the platonic bomb, which emits radiation that removes a species' ability to fall in love. So they're doomed to a long, slow genocide by just being friends. I'm pretty sure I did not get the reference at that at the age of 9. I don't think I knew what a platonic relationship was. But yeah, the humor in the Alf series, rereading this issue, there are a lot of jokes that I'm quite sure went over my head at the age of 9. It was technically the Alf series was technically a Star Comics publication.
Yes, it was.
Not
it
issue
got started
48.
in 19.
Sorry.
Yes, right, number 48. And it lasted for 50 whole issues too, including that 48th issue with the suggestive seal buggering cover. Yeah, but it was clearly not aimed just at kids, though. I mean, there's a certain it was a true all-ages book. There was some crossover appeal to older viewers of the Alf TV show. The creative team for this issue, and for most of the others in the series, as nearly as I could tell, were writer Mike Gallagher, penciler Dave Manak, and the inker, the great Marie Severin.
Oh, wow. She's always great with humor, Marie Severin, her work.
Oh, yes. This was not the only Star comic series graced by her talents. I think she actually both inked and penciled the Fraggle Rock comic. So, yeah, this was something I was happy to have. It just kind of hit the right chord in October of 1988. I savored it, treasured it, read it several times that first day. But perhaps most important of all to me, we're reminiscing about these nostalgic advertisements these things have. Well, in the second to last page, there is a subscription ad for Star Comics, even though this was 1988. And Star Comics sort of was in limbo as a autonomous imprint. Inside the comics, you could see the word Star Comics, but on the front cover, it just said Marvel. I think this transition happened sometime in 1987. But you could still subscribe to things like Alf, Care Bears, Heathcliff. There were actually 2 different Heathcliff comics being published at that time. But the back inside cover. Do you guys remember the Mad fold-ins they used to have on the inside back covers of Mad magazine?
Oh yeah.
Yep, there's one of those here. It's a Mad fold-in style fold-in image for advertising a new General Mills Monster cereal, which was introduced in the fall of 1988. You guys remember which one it was?
Oh God.
88.
Boo Berry. I don't know.
Nope, you're off by a decade or 2.
I figured.
It's actually Fruity Yummy Mummy.
That's right, the mummy one. Okay.
Yep.
Oh my.
Which was really just Fruit Brute repurposed and given a new mascot and a different flavor of marshmallow. Fruit Brute used to have lime-flavored marshmallows, you see. These were just plain old vanilla Marbits. But still, this was a watershed moment of my childhood. I loved Count Chocula, Frankenberry, and Boo Berry. And the addition of a 4th monster cereal. That just blew my little mind. And so this was the first they hadn't even started advertising Fruity Yummy Mummy on television yet. So I've treasured this copy of Alf number 11 for that historical significance. It's like a breakfast hieroglyphic on the wall of my childhood.
Now, Murd, I wanted to mention that every time I go to the supermarket, I go in the cereal aisle, they never have the monster cereals. But only on Halloween, right? They released them.
Right.
Because I got Count Chocula on Halloween. I bought 2 boxes of it. Mm-hmm. My kids never had it before. They devoured it. They didn't like Frankenberry very much, and I didn't get Boo Berry. But I love Count Chocula. I have to wait every October now. I got to stock up next time.
Yep.
That is the way to do it.
Yep.
And they actually brought back Fruit Brute and Fruity Yummy Mummy in 1 year only, like 2013 and 2014. Those 2 seasons.
Fantastic. General question, gentlemen. How long was Alf on? How many seasons?
2.
All righty. To the interwebs.
I'm just curious.
But
I'm going to say 5.
Is that many?
September 22nd, 1986 to March 24th, 1990.
Wow. And they have a cartoon,
They
too?
did.
Okay.
Where it was his life on Melmac.
Right,
Okay.
and there was also Alf Tales, which was just the cast of the Alf cartoon show acting out fairy tale parodies.
Yeah. Wow. So he was quite
This story I have in Alf number 11 actually references a character from the Alf cartoon show. Apparently on Melmac, Alf had a pet bird named Harry. It was a West Fellman smock bird. And he appeared on the cartoon show, and he crossed over into the comic. So some little bit of Alf synergy there.
I used to like getting the Alf trading cards, which had Bully-a baseball cards in them.
Bully-a baseball. Oh, yeah. Baseball played with fish parts.
Now I have memories of like Punky Brewster and Webster and all these shows. My God.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That was the time.
I'm going to go further back in the Wayback Machine.
Nice.
The year I was born, 1973. Jameson! That thing! What is it? Roar! It's my son! The mark of the man-wolf. Wait. I got a sniff. 1973 newsprint. Zounds. Now, I've talked about this book ad nauseum when we did our Spider-Man in the Bronze Age spotlight. I've talked about the Power Record.
Which
that
still to this day scares the living crap out of me.
based on this book.
When the moon rock is
Yep.
molded. Oh, he rips him. Oh!
Murd, if you wouldn't mind giving your Peter Parker impression once again, please.
It's the man wolf. I can't do any better than that. I'm
That's
afraid
all right.
I don't know the rest of the
That's
dialogue.
all you need, Murd, that vague New Yorkese accent. So, okay, this is from my Diefenbach collection. So I was born in 73, so obviously I wouldn't have read this when it came out. Late 70s, my cousins gave me a bunch of their comics. They had this comic in their pot. This is probably the first Spider-Man comic I ever read, I'm guessing. And I don't remember if I listened to the Power Record first or read this first. That I don't recall. But reading this as a kid, this is my first introduction to Jerry Conway, who was one of my all-time favorite comic book writers, and certainly in terms of Spider-Man especially. And I was struck as a kid comparing this issue to the Power Records. The Power Record, they, for lack of a better term, they kind of dumbed down for a younger audience. They removed a lot of the subplot elements that were part of the ongoing monthly Amazing Spider-Man
I've
title.
never compared the two. That's an interesting
They
thing to do.
take out a lot.
Wow.
And, like, for example, I'm reading this and I'm thinking, because Gwen Stacy's just been killed.
Yeah.
And he's thinking about it. I'm like, who's Gwen Stacy? Like, this book opened this whole vista where I wanted to learn about the world of Spider-Man. Who's Norman Osborn? Because he's thinking about him because he just, quote, died as well in the classic issues 121 and 122. I meet Jonah Jameson, Robbie Robertson, John Jameson, Peter going to college, Mary Jane, Flash Thompson. And first of all, it's John Romita art with Gil Kane. It's Gil Kane penciling and Ron Romita's inking.
Wow.
Okay, so that's quite an introduction right there. And I read this at least once a year. To me, this is the height of Spider-Man Bronze Age greatness. You've got the tight subplotting. You've got the supporting cast, one of the best, I think, in the history of superhero comics. You've got, the thought balloons I dearly miss as Spidey ruminates about his life and his troubles and his trials and tribulations. You've got this fantastic, the man wolf and just the space rock and the torn astronaut suit. And it's just everything that I love about Spider-Man is in this book. And the fact that you didn't have the Power Record, it's just a great set piece, these two, the comic and then the Power Record, and that contrast. But this is Conway at the height of his powers. He'd just written the death of Gwen and the death of the first death of the Goblin. And, it's all here. This is, when I think about what makes Spider-Man great, all those elements, it's all in Amazing Spider-Man 124. So that's my number 2.
Excellent. Okay, mine again was Action 484, cover dated June of 1978 as the 40th anniversary issue. And I actually don't know how I got an anniversary issue, but I did have this one at 484. The cover, Jose Garcia Lopez and Dick Giordano.
Yum.
And you can see in the lower right corner, they're flying over the Daily Star. So you know this is an Earth 2 story.
Right.
Again, writer Cary Bates, penciler Kurt Swan, inked by Joe Gialla. And the title splash page almost goes word for word for the TV show introduction. Superman, strange visitor from other planets, who came to Earth with powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men. Superman! And so it goes on, and it talks about how he takes a wife. And it starts out, well, you think they're in Metropolis. No, this is Earth 2. Okay, there's a Daily Star, and Superman's fighting, some robots, and you see a villain in the background, which is this guy, Colonel Future, some new guy or whatever.
Some upstart.
And of course, still at this point, Lois doesn't know that Clark is Superman. This is Earth 2 again, and Lois is still trying to figure out who he is. And Colonel Future calls in the Wizard, the Wizard villain, and to try to make Superman disappear. And he, does his magic thing, and sure enough, Superman disappears. But what comes back is Clark Kent, who just doesn't remember ever being Superman. So then Clark Kent starts, macking on Lois Lane hard, and within a page, they're getting married. just boom, just like that. And, on to the honeymoon, Lois discovers that, oh my God, I'm married to Superman. She figures it out because of some people who are after him. But again, Superman's gone. He's gone for like a year. Where's he gone? And, eventually people are trying to take credit for, I killed him or whatever. And Lois tracks down the Wizard and has him bring Superman back. And then all is well. But then Superman decides, hey, you know what? Why don't we actually get married? But wait, we are married. No, let's you and I get married. So Superman flies her to his Fortress of Solitude, and they get married in the statue of his parents. Again, nostalgia for this issue. It was an anniversary issue, gorgeously drawn Earth 2 story. They got married on Earth 2, Lois and Clark. And the last text page is a comparison of the Earth 2 and Earth 1 Superman.
Oh, how handy.
It's just really...
Plus, it's an ad for Zagnut Bar.
Yes, Zagnut Bar. The back cover is Super Siren. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
Bobby, watch that. I'm sorry, Mr. Jones.
You're punished.
That's right. Wonderfully drawn. And actually, speaking of artwork, a couple of years ago at one of the comic art cons, Joe Giello's family still was selling some of his artwork there, and they had this final splash page there.
Wow.
And it's
Imagine what that went for.
it was, several $1,000s.
Yeah.
But wet on my pride, but it's like, it would have been so cool to have. That's my number 2 issue, Action Comics 484.
Shane Aru?
All right. G.I. Joe number 21, the silent interlude issue.
Perfection.
March of 1984. One of the, if not the first comic I picked up at a comic book shop, which again was the aforementioned Turks. Across from the hoagie shop that my family frequented to get hoagies on weekend nights.
Where are the words?
Yeah, I know I've talked about this many times on the show. Picking up, because I was looking for number 20, which was one of the Joes, I forget who,
Clutch,
falling into the ground from wherever he was falling from. Asked the guy behind the counter, "Where's this issue?" Well, this is the only one. This is the current one. All right, I get this one. I get home, I open it up. Where are the words? I don't get it. Read quotes, air quotes, read through the issue many, many times. Loved the story because I had been watching the cartoon by that point. And
comic was a lot more mature than the cartoon.
Oh yes, yes.
Well,
but
people died in the comic, first of all.
Loved Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow regardless. So it was a great. Didn't understand at all what Scarlet had to do with any of that, or really Destro at that time. But from that issue, I went back issue collecting to get all the way back to number 1, which I never fully got. I got all the way back to, I think, number 4. Couldn't find 2 or 3 for years, but found number 1 through a friend at school who had it. Shoveled driveways for a winter to pay for that number 1 issue from him.
Shoveling driveways for the winter.
And I still have that issue of
I hope so.
that number 1 issue. I don't have the number 21 anymore.
But how much did they charge you for the number 1?
$6
Okay.
back then. Yep.
Wow.
And
$6.
G.I. Joe was really the first comic that I repeatedly would go to the comic store to get every month or so. I don't remember if I missed anything or not, but yeah, that was a big gateway for me. Was comic shop.
Issue is a master class in comic book storytelling.
Absolutely.
Because Hama wrote it, I did the breakdowns. I think Steve Lola finished, if I remember correctly. It's so easy to follow that story.
And am I wrong? It was supposed to have words.
That I'm not sure of, honestly.
I thought I read that it was supposed to, and something got screwed up. But yet, it's such a beautiful sequential story. You don't need them.
And like like many of us when we're kids at that age, when you got to see Snake Eyes in action, because he's front and center in that comic, it's so thrilling because he's just steamrolling through the Cobra Trooper garrison in that castle, basically.
And the one, if I remember right again, there's one where Scarlet and Snake Eyes are getting ready to lift off and escape.
Oh,
and somebody throws Storm Shadow.
Storm Shadow throws the katana at him, and he catches it in the
claps
palms.
it and flips it right over their head.
Because, Scarlet is on the Cobra Claw, that motorized glider, and she lands in front of Snake Eyes to take the sword instead of him, and then he
snaps it and throws it away.
And then they show the tattoo, the Arakaji, I think it is, clan.
That's the first.
So, like, as a kid, you're like, oh, wow, like, they're connected somehow. Yeah, it's
First inkling that they were connecting. Like, oh my God.
Go back to our G.I. Joe spotlight recorded with Matt
Yeah.
some years back. We go into all that in some detail.
It's very slow going because of money, but I've acquired the first 4 volumes of the complete
Oh, they're beautiful.
edition.
The
Yes,
IDW
they are.
hardcovers, they're fantastic.
Yep. I want to get to at least.
I had them through issue 50 at least.
That's at least what I want to get
Yeah.
to because that's where it was really just spectacular,
Yes, it
and
was.
then it started to fall
And
off.
the excuse me, the editors do a great job of giving you supplemental essays
Yeah,
and
they do.
talking about
They
the
do.
background and the history and so forth.
Yep.
Great pick, Shane.
That's number 2.
All right. Well, if I'm not mistaken, it is now time for number 1 reveals.
Indeed.
Chris, we'll start with you.
You! It can't be you! It can't! I put you behind bars only a few minutes ago. No jail can hold the Vulture. Not when I have sworn your death. Marvel Tales starring Spider-Man, issue 105.
Okay, wow, what a dramatic reading that was. My number 1 is DC Comics Presents Annual Number 1, Superman and the Golden Age Superman, in a story entitled Crisis on 3 Earths.
Wow.
My number 1 is Justice League number 5, One Punch.
And my number 1 is Bugs Bunny number 232.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Wow, I can't wait to hear that one.
This is not I think, like, story-wise, the best comic of my selections, but this has deep nostalgia. So, Marvel Tales, as many listeners know, it reprints primarily old Spider-Man stories. This is a reprint of Amazing Spider-Man 128, The Vulture Hangs High.
Which is not too far along from your number 2 issue.
Correct. Excuse me. And the scripter is Jerry Conway. The art is the great Ross Andrew. Inking Frank, I'm going to mispronounce his name, I apologize. Frank Giasioia, Dave Hunt, John Costanza lettering, M. Brand colorist, Roy Thomas editor. So I'm on a family vacation with my parents, either St. Thomas or Bermuda. I forgot which island.
Wow, look at you.
I'm expecting Jersey Shore.
Yeah, exactly. No.
My dad's business was doing pretty well back then.
Look at you.
So, plus plane fare didn't cost you your mortgage payment to go.
That's true. Yeah, that's
trip
true.
Also.
That's true.
And you actually have to pay for your luggage and your meal.
Yeah.
So anyway, or the soda for that matter. So this was printed in 1979. So I am 6. My parents buy me this comic when we're there. I love Spider-Man. I was watching the
Live action?
the live action and the reruns of the classic 60s cartoon
Oh, sure.
on WPIX.
Tubby PIX.
Yep.
11
Love PIX.
alive.
Yep.
So I love the character. I have had probably this Mark of the Man-Wolf book already, or at least had read it, and I had the Power Records. The reason why this book is my number 1 is because my father sat down with me. I was 6. And he read me the whole story with me, and he
Wow.
did all the voices
Wow.
of all the characters. And it's a Spider-Man. It's a great, as an older man, it's great Jerry Conway. It's a whodunit, where the Vulture is implicated in a murder. Mary Jane Watson is a witness. Her life's in danger. And Peter's trying to figure out what actually happened. So it's a 2-part mystery story. This is the second part. Like you read the first part probably 20 years later, something like that. So, again, all the essence of classic early Bronze Age Spidey. It's all here. The supporting cast, the great, the humor, the ruminations and the thought balloons. I love Ross Andrews' work. He's always, I think, one of the great Spider-Man artists, sometimes overlooked. But for me, why this is my number 1 is because I have this memory of my father on this Caribbean island sitting in some restaurant somewhere, reading me this story, and just further deepened my love for this character. And Spider-Man has remained ever since, besides the Black Panther, my all-time favorite Marvel character and superhero in general. A lot of it goes back to this memory.
That's awesome.
And Shay, I want to point out on the inside cover an ad for Battlestar Galactica T-shirts.
Nice.
Because it is 1979, so that's the
Nice.
brief window when that show was... I love 70s T-shirt design. Look at those funky lines.
Oh, yeah.
And that's your original copy?
That is, look, it's...
I got to see it. It's already attached on the cover.
It's attached. This is it. I've kept it my entire life.
Nice.
Wow.
So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my number 1.
That's an awesome story. That's
That's awesome.
That's why this episode I was looking forward to so very much.
Happy to oblige, honey.
All right. My number one, like I mentioned, DC Comic Presents and number one. This was sometime in 1982 this came out. It was $1.
Oh, you mentioned this comic many times.
I did. I'll get to that another reason why in a while. But first of all, it's a great Marv Wolfman written story. Art by Rich Buckler. He did the cover with Dick Giuliano inks. And it's Luthor from Earth 1 and Luthor from Earth 2 getting beaten by the respective Supermen. They get in jail, then they switch Earths. They battle off the other Supermen, and they go to Earth 3. They team up with Ultraman, and the Lex Luthor, or the Alexi Luthor of that Earth.
It was heroic, right?
Is heroic.
Yeah.
And this is the first time you see a hero on Earth 3. He falls in love with the Lois Lane from Earth 3. They eventually get married, and of course, which leads into Crisis.
Oh, yes.
But this is a really cool story because Luthor of Earth 2 goes a little cuckoo and decides to merge Earths 1 and Earth 2 and destroy them both. Of course, the heroes save the day. There's great dialogue back and forth between the Supermen about, because Earth 2 is already married, and he's going, why don't you marry Earth 1? Why don't you marry your Lois Lane? And, no, I don't know. And they go back, I have to save the whole Earth. There's not enough time to get married. And a lot of back and forth about that. It's just wonderfully drawn, wonderful story. Ties into Crisis, which I love. But this, for some unknown reason to me, is the only comic I kept from my childhood. This is my original copy, the only comic I kept.
Yep.
So everything else you've acquired since then is all just rebought.
Right, but this is the only Pants first owned copy comic of my collection, and it's a humdinger of a story anyway. So that's why it's top of my list.
And I got that jolt of electricity of the spine when he talked about himself in third person.
Yeah.
There's a full page ad in here for a Sergeant Rock action figure. I don't think I ever saw one of those
Sergeant
before.
Rock action figures.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember that.
There's very few ads in it. It's an extra size. There's a very nice text piece here by Rich Morrissey about the various Earths, Earths 1, 2, and 3. Again, just the only
Can I
comic
see the Sergeant Rock ad?
Sure. The only comic that I kept from my child. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I wonder why
but,
you did that. That's
it's
awesome.
the only comic that I kept.
Shane, I want to mention one thing about the Sergeant Rock action figure. I remember when G.I. Joe was huge, they did a line of Sergeant Rock toys. Thanks, Pants.
You're welcome.
And you could see how they were trying to cash in because the villain that was fighting Sergeant Rock, I forgot what they were called, but it was something snake-like. And I remember the ads encouraged you could play with G.I. Joe. And I remember I bought two of the villain, like an anti-aircraft battery and like an amphibious vehicle because they had snakes. I said, they're part of my Cobra army now. So I just remember that memory came to the fore.
All right. My number one is Justice League number 5. On the cover is Guy Gardner being held back by
Classic
Martian
cover.
Manhunter and Captain Marvel. And above it had to happen. Batman versus Guy Gardner. Showdown. And inside is Guy Gardner goading or egging Batman on, and Batman with one punch knocks him out. And I absolutely love Black Canary's reaction. And Blue Beetle. The blah!
Because who missed it?
Black Canary missed it.
That's right.
One punch! This issue solidified a lot of things for me. Not only was I... Because, again, I really think this issue I bought at the same time as Justice League 4 and Annual 1, somewhere in Ocean City, New Jersey. This issue really solidified what I thought of as cool Batman. Not knowing the whole dynamic of the first couple issues where he was the leader at that time, just knowing that, wow, Batman and a Green Lantern are going to fight? What's with that? Drawn beautifully, the expressions, the reactions, the way that they're drawn and then word ballooned in, just absolutely spectacular issue. And again, on a family vacation, getting a couple other DC books, it's just a great fond memory.
And it all seems to come back to New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I'm so excited to get that omnibus because I've never read the entirety of that storyline, like the Blaha. I've read parts of it, so I'm really looking forward to sitting down
Oh, my God.
and then talking about it with you on the air after I read the whole thing.
Okay. How many issues does that omnibus encompass?
I forgot. It's a lot. I mean, I probably shouldn't have bought it, but I was like, you know what? I've never read all these stories. I want to own it between just 2 covers.
I'll try to look it up and try to reread all of them, so that when
it's going to take me a while, so no rush. And
Okay.
I haven't even got it yet, so
right.
I look forward to that discussion.
Very good.
And that original art page, I don't know if it's exchanged hands recently, but it is posted online on Comic Art Fans, so you can actually look at the original art for that.
Wow. It's just such a...
Kevin McGuire's autograph down there in the bottom.
And I didn't know what had happened to the Justice League previously. I had no idea that Legends happened or anything like that. I was just picking up a book that had Batman mentioned on the cover and on the annual cover, and I was like, okay, whatever. But boy, is that whole run, but
classic.
especially those first maybe dozen issues, boy, are they something special.
Mert?
All right, time to talk about Bugs Bunny. All right, so this is issue number 232 of the Bugs Bunny comic book. It was published by Whitman Comics, which was kind of a degenerate form of the once mighty Gold Key comic imprint. It's sort of the last stage in the devolution of that company, where it had basically been reduced to just repackaging old reprinted stories from its own past and selling them in those little plastic baggies, like 3 to a shot, that you could find in
Woolworths.
So, yeah, that's probably where this comic came from. Then Whitman was just kind of distributing these sort of half-assed reprints of its old material in places like Woolworths, convenience stores. I used to find them in the Hoy's 5 and Dime store across the street here in Stone Harbor. But this particular comic did not come out of one of those packs for me. My father, this is a recurring theme here, my father found it at a yard sale. And so when I was, the comics that I had as a young child are the ones that he would pick up for me at yard sales and garage sales. And since he read cartoon character-based comic, mostly Disney, but the occasional Warner Brothers character comic as a kid, those were the kind of comics he seemed to think I should have. So he would bring them home for me. And it's just as well because I kind of like your little nephew Alex, Brian, as we learned in our last episode. He's been watching all these classic Warner Brothers theatrical shorts. Those were airing on CBS on Saturday mornings in my earliest childhood. And so I knew all those characters, loved them. Really, I think the only thing that was more influential on me in the earliest phase of my life than Looney Tunes were the Muppets. But there weren't any Muppet comics at that time. So, I think of this issue of Bugs Bunny. This is really the main reason why I made it my number one pick on this top 5 list. I think of this, correctly or not, as the first comic book I ever owned. I think Dad brought it home when I was about 4 years old. It was very well loved. I wish you guys could see it right now, but it is my original copy, of course. The cover is long departed from this mortal coil. The front page is held together with the yellowed, brittle remains of a few pieces of early 80s Scotch tape. I can remember distinctly, I was behind the counter at the Christmas barn. I was kind of rolling around on the floor reading my Bugs Bunny comic, and it got caught underneath the leg of a stool, and when I tried to rip it free, I put a big gouge in the front page. I can remember being mildly upset about that, but then I just kind of shrugged, taped it back together, and continued reading it.
Mert, your memory is extraordinary. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's a good comic. What can I say? It consists of material primarily reprinted from 1957, because there's like 4 different stories in here, and each one has a little copyright Warner Brothers Inc. and a date. So most of them are from 1957. So there's a story in which Bugs carves a flute out of a carrot that has kind of a Pied Piper effect on lady bunnies, which results in him getting a lot of unwanted attention from said lady bunnies and chased out of town by angry boyfriend bunnies. So to escape, he signs on a treasure hunt with Yosemite Sam and his pirate ship. There's a Tweety and Sylvester story in here. There's a Porky and Petunia Pig text piece. There's a story in which Bugs Bunny and his little nephew Bandy Bunny run a scam on Yosemite Sam. But most memorable of all, the story I liked and reread the most often, Bugs and Elmer Fudd go on a South Seas treasure hunt adventure with an old sea captain who's seeking a massive gold boulder guarded by carnivorous flowers called biting begonias. So it's kind of appropriate to me having just come off an engagement playing a character in a play about man-eating plants. Here we're talking about biting begonias. And so this comic it's probably the first comic I ever owned. I think of it that way anyway. I read it innumerable times, and so it enjoys a place of honor in my collection for that reason alone.
All right, magnificent.
Excellent.
Awesome.
All right, now as always, sometimes the most fun part of these episodes is our alternates. So, Chris, you want to go with your alternates?
I have a lot.
Well, go ahead.
Okay.
This is your idea. This is your baby, so
all right.
Go right ahead.
Okay,
Okay, you're done.
Isn't he such a...
He's a pip.
Ain't I a stinker?
Again, a cutie patootie. All right, a lot of these are Spidey because he was my go-to hero when I was growing up. So I've mentioned these many times in the year. Issues 130 and 131. You'll never believe the far-out fabulous Spider-Mobile! Take it from us, friend. It's not what you think. So, and then, of course, in 131, Aunt May, who's deluded, marries Dr. Octopus. Or, he tries to marry her. Because in that story, we mentioned this in our Bronze Age Spotlight of Spider-Man, Aunt May inherited a nuclear reactor in Canada, which Ock wanted to get his hands on. Nuff said, read it. Is that in the Spider-Mobile? Fireside did... In addition to the origins of Marvel Comics, Son of War, bring the bad guys, the superwomen, they did a series of books focused on specific characters where Stan Lee would write essays giving editorial and historical observations, his own version, and so forth. And this is The Amazing Spider-Man, and it contains issue 82, and then came Electro. Beautiful artwork by Romita and the late, great Jim Mooney. What I love about this issue is Spidey's going to be a guest on a talk show a la Johnny Carson. Mm-hmm. I think they make somebody up for the story. And he's swinging over a smokestack, and smog encases him, and his costume is filthy. So he's got to clean it before he goes on television. So he puts a paper bag on his head and goes to a laundromat to wash his costume and sits there in the paper bag while everybody's gaping at him. It's that classic sort of late Silver Age... Again, I think this is Stan Lee's greatest era as a writer, like the latter 60s Spider-Man stuff. It's so pitch perfect. All right. This comic blew my mind. The Man-Thing number 5. Night of the Laughing Dead. Also a power record.
Wow.
Wait, 1974. Wait a minute. Now, I want to read you, because remember, the Man-Thing can't talk. There's a lot of third-person narration. This is Steve Gerber. The swamp is more than merely a place. It is a churning, seething, bubbling bed of life, of which you are a part. Once you were a man, a chemist named Ted Sallis, until one little experiment went somewhat awry, and you changed. The serum that was to have made you a super soldier, combined with strange forces in the swamp, to make you over into this, a shambling, mindless mocker of your former humanity, the macabre Man-Thing. Look at that Mike Plug artwork.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
So, got the power record, got the comic. Boy, did they change things to the power record. But this is why I think Gerber was one of the great writers of the 1970s and 80s. This is a very mature, sophisticated story about a circus clown who commits suicide. And they put it in the power record. The 70s.
Wow.
Okay? But this is thoughtful. This is mature. It's sophisticated. Oh, there's a Marvel value stamp of the Dragon Man. And, it goes into... what was the name of the Man-Thing's sidekick? The guy. Do you remember? I just forgot his name. You know what I'm talking about?
Whose sidekick?
Man-Thing. Richard... was it Richard Rory? I think that was his name.
That sounds familiar.
Like his human friend who would kind of talk to him and be the audience's point of view. Gerber just goes into all these characters in a way that is so moving and human. One of the great books of the Bronze Age. All right, Star Wars 56 and 57. These are the first Star Wars comics I read besides the Treasure Edition of the original movie adaptation. Got them off a spinner rack. 2 months in a row, Pants. I was lucky.
Score.
And classic Lando Calrissian goes back to Cloud City after Empire. Lobot is deranged because his programming is off. The Empire has taken over the city. Beautiful Walt Simonson, Tom Palmer artwork. David Michelini's script. Great Lando Calrissian adventure story. Luke shows up. Fantastic. All right, here's my DC comic. Blitzkrieg number 5. Now, the only DC comics I read, I didn't realize the greatness of DC until like the latter 1980s when I read Dark Knight and Year One and so forth. But I always loved military history, so my parents would buy me Sergeant Rock, Unknown Soldier, Our Fighting Forces. But this comic blew my mind because it's about German soldiers in World War II. With that Joe Kubert cover. Mm-hmm. He did most of the covers.
Yep.
And it's from the German perspective, which I was always fascinated by. Because, my grandfathers fought in the war, and I've always heard their stories. And this is a very different type of war comic. And it always stayed with me. I've never read the whole Blitzkrieg series. It was very short. And you, of course, get the Green Machine
Oh, yes.
bike on the back with, the levers and so forth.
And they're still making Green Machines today.
I saw one at
they
Walmart,
are.
actually. All right, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., 16 and 17. These are reprints of early Lee Kirby Silver Age Nick Fury stories. I became obsessed with Hydra. The costumes, the oath, the whole... I love, the Marvel, criminal conspiracy, subversive organizations, AIM, Hydra, Secret Empire.
Yeah.
And this was, my gateway to that. This became, any backage with Hydra, I would grab it immediately as a kid. I was fascinated by that organization. Through walls of stone they stalk. Beware the agents of Khyber. Black Panther number 12. Kirby returns to Marvel in the mid-'70s. The deal was, what does he want to draw? And he writes and he edits his own stuff. So Kirby mid-'70s, fun, wacky. He ignored all continuity, which some people like it, some people don't. My first Black Panther comic, so trippy, so fun, so off the wall, and I was dedicated to the character ever since, and had my mind blown when I read other Black Panther stuff and went, wait a minute, this is nothing like the stuff I just read in this Kirby comic, because he was just doing his own thing. But this is one of my first exposures to the grandeur of Kirby art. We'll be talking more about Jack Kirby in the very near future, by the way.
Oh?
Amazing Spider-Man 231 and 232 from the classic Roger Stern era of Spider-Man, with John Romita Jr. When I think of Spider-Man telling quips and knocking his foes off balance with his humor, he battles Cobra Mr. Hyde. These are perfect stories. When Wizards did their hardcover, remember they did the hardcovers like Best of Spider-Man,
Sure.
Best of X-Men? Bendis did an essay. He talked about these two issues, two of the best Spider-Man stories ever. I agree with him wholeheartedly. 231, 232, Vintage Spider-Man. Perfection. Read them.
The Power
Records.
I had the Cap one.
Yep. Now,
Feel the Fear of the Phoenix.
Yep.
Now.
Yep. Baron Zemo Jr.
Oh, yes.
These were so some of my first introductions were Power Records.
And
So,
those were freaking creepy as hell,
yes.
some of those.
So this reprints, I want to say it's Cap 168, where Cap and the Falcon meet. He's not Baron Zemo Jr. He's called himself the Phoenix. I love the artwork. It's Sal Buscema. This is from the classic Englehart period of Cap in the 70s. When I found the original comic, I was like, wow, they changed it so much in terms of the dialogue.
See,
the
now I'm going to
subplots.
go back and get on my Power Records. I don't know if they still have them anywhere, but compare them to the actual issues.
It's
'Cause
fun.
I never thought to do that. I never had that one.
Okay, so Tomb of Dracula Power Record. It reprints Tomb of Dracula, I think it's 19.
Tomb of Dracula Power Record.
Yeah, well, they did them all. They had Frankenstein. They had Werewolf by Night. Oh, yeah. Man-Thing. So, this is the first time I saw Gene Colan artwork.
Oh,
Wow.
And it's Dracula and Rachel Van Helsing stranded together in a blizzard in the Alps. They have to work together to survive. Look at the Colan artwork. When I got the real issue, and again, because it's Marv Wolfman, it blew my mind. Okay, from Bring on the Bad Guys.
Man, you're still going.
I have so many pants. This is tough, okay?
I got 3.
Yeah. So Bring
Yeah,
on
I
the
got
Bad
2.
Guys. All right. Silver Surfer. It's 4 or 5. It's the first appearance of Mephisto. This is the first time I really saw John Buscema artwork. And even as a kid, it again blew off the top of my head. And just come on. Look at that.
Oh, nice.
All right. And I love this. And we talked about this in our Silver Surfer Spotlight
Yep.
from the beginning of the year. Just the Mephisto character, just the epic battle of good versus evil, Mephisto tempting him, Shalabal. Fantastic. Incredible. And then Origins of Marvel Comics. 2 things. First of all, they do a reprint here of Fantastic Four 55.
Oh, with Silver Surfer on the cover. Yep. This man.
It's that you're thinking of issue 51.
No, that's not that
When
one.
strikes the Silver Surfer.
Yep.
This is the first time I saw the Silver Surfer. And this is Kirby at the height of his Silver Age powers.
Is that Alicia Masters in that story as well?
Yeah. And we talked about this on our FF in the Silver Age Spotlight with Jamie D some years back. The Thing battles the Surfer because he thinks he's going after Alicia. He misinterprets the Surfer's intentions. I became a Jack Kirby devotee before I even realized it when I read this story. Because it just, the artwork, the battle scenes, Lockjaw, I mean, come on. It's... make mine marvel. And the last book I wanted to mention, I don't have it with me, though, and Kevin Moyer would appreciate this, is from Son of Origins. Again, these are my first introductions. Daredevil 47, Brother Take My Hand.
Oh, yes.
Which I could see why Lee chose it. I think it's one of the strongest scripts of the Silver Age, where Daredevil, it's colon artwork.
Yep.
Daredevil, a Vietnam veteran, is blinded, and Daredevil, is trying to help him when he comes back to the States. And he ends up getting involved with gangsters. It's a very moving story about a man, learning to live with, what's happened to him. And it's just, but it's the colon artwork. There's a scene where Daredevil is fighting gangsters in darkness, which of course gives him the advantage. And I remember him vaulting over a couch, and I was like 10. I was like, look at this art, And then as you get older, you realize the glory of Gene Colan. Yep. So. Those are the ones that just are off the top of my head, basically, but those are my ultimates.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I could have gone hog wild, but I sort of kept it to what I could basically find. One of my ultimates is DC Comics presents #1, Superman and the Flash. Superman, Flash combining together. This was the first issue of this new title. Again, Jose Garcia Lopez covered, Dan Adkins also on the art and the interiors. July, August 1978, written by Martin Pasco. Again, around the time of the anniversary and everything, there's a race. They got to, become friends again. Well, not become friends again, but team up against this villain. But it's another one where, at the end, the Reverse Flash shows up, and it's an awesome battle. But it's only part 1 of 2, and I never got part 2. I know it's a familiar refrain, but it took me, again, 25 years getting to part number 2. So that's what holds memory for me. Another one is Superman number 311. Because of this creepy cover, this villain is just beating the crap out of Superman, and everybody else around it has this disease. They got like little splotches on them. Yeah,
that's
it
gross.
is. Creepy cover. Guest starred The Flash, though. Again, the Jose Garcia Lopez cover. Kurt Swan arc on the interior, another Martin Pasco story. It's called Plague of the Antibiotic Man.
Yuck.
It's part 1 of a longer story. Again, that really struck me with the cover. But I couldn't let it go without having one of the oversized issues from the 70s. When I was at your store a couple of years ago, and you had a couple of those, just this wave went over me of emotion. I think I was at your store. I had this from another purchase.
Oh, my God.
Limited Collector's Edition. This is C46. It's the world's greatest superheroes, the Justice League of America. It reprints issues 24 and 34 of the original run, the Silver Age, in their large glory here. But what really sells it for me are a couple things. The front cover is this iconic image of Dick Giordano's, where you have the 8 superheroes running or flying towards the reader. You have from the top, going clockwise, Superman, Hawkman, Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, and Aquaman. But Aquaman's flying. Always bugged me.
Yeah.
On the back is the Justice Society version, where you have Superman, Hawkman, Wonder Woman, Dr. Midnight, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, and Dr. Fate.
You know, Pants, I think Toon Tumblers,
yes, they use because I have this Toon Tumbler. John Morrissey got us that. That sells it for me. What also sells it for me is there's some artwork from like behind the scenes of the JLA, the Alex Toth art stuff from the Super Friends cartoon. You've got that. And then you had this amazing 2-page centerfold by Terry Austin of the satellite era Justice League. And at the back of the book is the index of who's who. That is just
That's your money's worth right there.
Yeah, exactly. Frickin'
I don't
tastic.
know if I've ever seen that book.
All right, Shane. Next time I go to Pittsburgh, if they have it, I'm going to buy that for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I
definitely pick that up.
these things mean so much to me as a kid. I mean, just getting these huge things for $1, and they had so many of them. Of course, they had the originals, Batman, Hulk, Spider-Man, Superman,
And that's
team up.
C-46, you said?
This is L. Oh yes, C-46.
Okay.
Wow.
But just some of the other reprints of like supervillains. Oh, but this one stood out to me because it's just iconic on so many ways.
Heck yeah. All right. My alternates, the first one I'm going to say is The Killing Joke. And it's because, I know it's a square-bound prestige format, whatever you want to call it. It's because of the way I acquired it.
Ooh,
How old
how
were
did
you
you
when you read
acquire it?
How old were you when you read it?
I was the age that it came out. I
16.
bought it. I was 16.
Okay.
Yeah, if it was 88.
88, yeah.
Yeah, I was 16.
Yep.
I went to the comic store, Turks, and they had a small cardboard standee with issues in it, but it was empty. And it said Batman Killing Joke, whatever it was. Like a little tiny display thing. And I asked him about it, and I said, what's this? He goes, oh, that's The Killing Joke, Batman The Killing Joke. Oh, wow. Oh, do you have one in the back? And he said, well, are you the guy that called about it? Yes, I am. No clue.
Wow.
I totally lied my ass off.
Scoundrel, you.
I was. And
This is right up there with you changing price tags. Holy
yeah,
mackerel.
yeah. And he went
I
from the
love the
back,
dark side of Shane.
pulled it out, and he says, all right, here you go. I'm like, okay, thanks. And that's how I got my first print of Killing Joke right off the rack the week it came out.
That was tremendous.
No idea what it was.
I never knew that story.
Oh, my God. I've said that before on the show. at
I don't
some point.
remember that.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. So
So how did you react to that as a 16-year-old when you read it?
I just thought it was a cool story. I didn't
Yeah.
really, it wasn't like grotesque or anything.
Right.
I mean, 16, I'd seen and read other stuff. So.
Right.
But yeah, that's how I read that, got that first issue. Or that issue. Another one, it's another Batman. It's number 408. After Crisis, with Jason Todd boosting the hubcap off the Batmobile.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the first Batman comic I bought at the comic store that started me in collecting Batman. I thought maybe it was an earlier issue, but as I looked at the covers, I really don't think so. I really think 408 was the first one that I got and then started to collect them from there. I also went backwards into the mid-300s before I sold all those a few years ago. But yeah, that one. And I didn't know the whole controversy between Dick Grayson and Jason Todd and how the pre-crisis Jason Todd mirrored the pre-crisis and probably regular crisis, post-crisis Dick Grayson origin, where they were so closely related. I had no idea that people didn't like Jason Todd. I just read, oh, okay, there's a Robin. I didn't know at that time Robin's real name, so Jason Todd. I'm like, okay, Jason Todd. It wasn't until years later that I figured out or learned about what had happened with everybody and all the what led to the whole number in the 426-27 issue where they killed off Robin kind of thing. I had no idea where all that started and came from, but that's one of the earliest ones, if not the earliest Batman comic I remember picking off the rack and buying at the comic shop. The last one is, and let's see, that was Batman 408, June of 87, I think. January of 88 was Millennium #1.
Okay.
And again, I had gotten G.I. Joe, I had gotten some Justice League, I'd gotten Batman by this point. But Justice League with Rocket Red and Millennium, where that Justice League issue, Rocket Red betrays everybody, that was the first time I ever even heard the word crossover. Because the issue, like leading up to it, some of the Justice League or whatever it was, had the little checklist inside, the Millennium checklist. And I'd, what's this? And I knew it had the Justice League in it, so I got it, not knowing really what was going on, because there was no internet, no previews magazine for me or anything. I just picked it up because crossover event, Justice League, great. And that's how I got into loving crossovers at that point. Then I learned about what Crisis on Infinite Earths were and Secret Wars and different things that happened, legends before and after everything. And I said it earlier in the episode, while I didn't like, or the other episode we recorded, I didn't necessarily like how Millennium ended, but I sure enjoyed the ride up to that point, getting all these weekly issues, putting them all together, reading them in the order that they came out in. That was a lot of fun for me and a completely new experience. That was also a time when I remember being sick with a cold, a fever, for a couple weekends in a row, or maybe a couple months at different times in a row, where I wrote down what I wanted and what I thought they cost, which I was completely wrong the first month. But the second month I had to do it, I was right, and gave it to my dad because he said, I know you usually go get comics today. Give me your list of what you want. I'll go run and get them and bring them back for you while you're sick. And that's something that he did
My
quite
mother would
often.
do that for me, too. It's
It's
fond memories.
I can remember him coming. I'm laying on the couch in the living room. The TV's in one part. He comes through the kitchen, and he said, "Well, you're a little off on your prices, but we'll figure that out later. Here's the books," because I paid for them with my allowance money and stuff. Here's the books, and then the next month when I gave it to him, I used to get fevers for weekends at a shot. I don't know why. And he ran and got him again, and then I was spot on with the money. So, but that was the first time I remember my dad saying, "Hey, give me a list of what you want. I'll go run to the store and hand it to him, and he'll get what he has. He'll get for you." So that was great.
Cool.
Murd, any alternates?
Well, my list of alternates is really very short. I do remember there was an issue of Porky Pig comics, published by Dell, I think, that I enjoyed quite a bit. There was one story in it that involved Porky and Sylvester on the run from a pair of murderous gypsies. Porky had taken a nap underneath a parasol with a dagger-shaped tear in it, which resulted in him getting a dagger-shaped sunburn on his head that marked him for death by members of a gypsy cult. The saving grace was a little pouch full of jolly berries, which are a fruit that is so intensely sweet that anyone who eats one begins to laugh uncontrollably, just dissolves into paroxysms of pleasure and becomes helpless. And so Sylvester and Porky force feed these gypsies these jolly. I wonder if they might not be mushrooms of some kind instead of berries. There was something of a subtext there, I think, as an adult. But anyway, I enjoyed it as a kid. And other than that, there are a bunch of little things, like more Whitman comics, mostly, that Dad picked up at various yard sales for me. There were a few issues of Beep Beep the Roadrunner, which is the Looney Tunes Roadrunner, your dad's favorite, Shane.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Who in this comic appeared with his 3 younger nephews, and instead of just beeping as he's supposed to, he spoke, but he spoke only in rhyme, which made very little sense. There were also some issues of various duck characters, like not the classic stuff, but more like latter-day 70s produced comics featuring Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And there was an issue of Super Goof, which was Goofy with superpowers. I did have a hardcover Donald Duck Treasury, like a big honkin' brick of a book. White cover. I think there was an image of Donald Duck slamming his head against a wall on the front of it. My dad picked this up at a yard sale as well, and it did contain maybe a dozen different classic Carl Barks duck comics, including several featuring Uncle Scrooge. So that one I read over and over and over again as a kid, and that was some quality material. And last but not least, another Star Comics offering. Back in the fall of 1988, I came into possession of a copy of Visionaries and Knights of the Magical Light, number 1. And some 30 years later, I'm still trying to complete the 6-issue run of that series.
I'll keep an eye out for that, Murd.
Well, this
And
was...
pencils by a young Mark Bagley.
Oh, wow. As I said before, I knew this was going to be a lot of fun going in this episode. Just so many childhood memories, and again, I guess I'm the oldest of the group here, but still there was some overlap in the time frames there. So
Yeah.
I'm both that youngster Murd back there with his Alf comics.
Thank you. Thank you,
Kill me.
Thank you, gentlemen. This episode was everything I would hope it would be.
Yes,
Excellent.
these are always fun to do. We'll do some more top 5, I'm sure, at some point. Thank you for all your suggestions out there. There's
Keep
just
them coming.
so many of them. We only do so many shows when we can, but this was a lot of fun. All right, and once again, this episode was brought to you by SuperheroStuff.com. And go to for all of your
Superhero stuff!
Visit us at ComicGeekspeak.com to send an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by The Comic Forums and let us know what your favorite childhood...
TheComicForums.vanillaforums.com.
Did I forget that part?
You
I
did.
did forget that part. Stop by and let us know what your favorite childhood issues are. Follow us on
Comics.
Twitter.
Not issues with you as a kid.
Comics. Well, not issues. It's getting late.
Yes, it is.
Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Thank you to everyone who contributes to the episodes. We appreciate it. We love you. We couldn't do it without you. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
You got it on Wednesday, and you was talking about it going to the volume up. These guys will talk about it, everything that geeks love. From kids to laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read. And comics, movies, games, toys, artists, comic geeks speak, comic geeks speak, comic geeks speak, comic geeks speak, comic geek. Uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is Comic Geeks Speak.
Magnificent, gentlemen.
And that's a wrap.
Bingo! Looks like I've hit the jackpot. It's the man-wolf. Here we go again, Wolfie. This time, I have a theory to try out. It's my guess that pendant is what's making you a werewolf. And so it has to come off, even if I have to tear it off.